I love The Legend of Zelda. My most fond gaming memories are of playing Zelda. And with A Link Between Worlds coming out next week, I thought, why not create a top 15 of my favorite Zelda games before, a 16th Zelda game comes out and ruins the joke. Keep in mind that I'm making this based on how enjoyable the games are by today's standards. I'm not going to put Zelda 1 first because it started the whole series. Also, no CDI, no Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land. I really hope I don't need to explain that. Also, you should be warned that there's going to be minor spoilers throughout this. I mean, I'm not going to spoiler major plot events like Sheikah's really, but if you're that guy who's like, oh my god, he just told me to get the third bosses, so I'll get reported, called the cops, you should close this video right now because you're going to be mad at me. So then, without further ado, let's get this party started. There's really not much to say about this game that hasn't already been said. It's the black sheep in the series, it's nothing like any of the other Zelda games. I mean, Zelda 2 is by no means a bad game, but when compared to a series so refined, so polished, so perfect like Zelda, it's just not special at all. I mean, I know there's some people who just love The Adventure of Link, and I respect that, but for me, it's just a weird side-scroller in the best video game series ever created. The original Legend of Zelda is dated. It's very, very dated. It's like so dated that it's almost unplayable. I mean, burn down a random bush to buy bait to give to some enemy 6 dungeons. What? I mean, I like it when games encourage exploration, but this game is practically an advertisement for Nintendo power. Some of the secrets are impossible to find, and that just kills it for me. I mean, I'm glad that The Legend of Zelda was made, because it started my favorite video game series ever, but by today's standards, it's just too frustrating. Minish Cap is an interesting game. See, once upon a time, Nintendo was super lazy and didn't want to make any games for the Game Boy Advance that weren't remakes. But the demand for a new Zelda game was just too high, and so they caved in and got Capcom to do it for them. Minish Cap, it feels different than every other Zelda game, and to be honest, it's one of the most innovative and well-controlled 2D Zeldas out there. But at the same time, it just lacks the charm that makes Zelda games so special. For one, there's basically zero exploration. You see, the stupid hat tells you what to do all the time, and this actually made the game harder for me. I mean, if every time I boot up my game, a hat tells me to go to the flashing potion shop on my map, and then when I try to go to the flashing potion shop, it turns out I'm not supposed to go the way it looks like you're supposed to go. No, you're supposed to go to Lon Lon Ranch and help Malin get a key from her house. She can open the passage to Lake Hylia, which then has an alternate route back down to the potion shop. I'm never gonna think that because the game is shoving what to do in my face. I'm not going to explore like I normally would, and it just makes it less fun. So Capcom did an alright job with this game, but when you're looking at the super high standards of Zelda games, it just doesn't keep up. Okay, I have a confession. I've barely played either of these games, so take the placement on this list with a grain of salt. I have so little experience with these games that I really have no right ranking them, but A Link Between Worlds comes out next week, so shut up! Honestly, the DS games have some of the coolest items in Zelda, and the characters are funny and charming, but I was held back from really enjoying, or for that matter even finishing these games, by one thing. Yeah, that. I mean, Nintendo, you had a D-pad, 4 buttons, 2 triggers. Like, why would you ever throw those out for a touchscreen? I mean, I could see using the bottom screen for controlling the boomerang and other items, but is it really necessary for moving and slashing and everything else? I mean, I might be being rash, but the touchscreen controls, for me, hold these games back from standing out in the Zelda series. Four Swords Adventures could have been so good! The controls are incredible, the concept is wonderful, but no. It was designed with 2 fatal flaws that make it in the end just pretty damn good and not amazing. 1. Puzzles. Why did Nintendo think we would want to do puzzles? What other multiplayer game do you know of where you sit in a room with your friends and try to figure out how to get past a route? None. Because nobody likes multiplayer puzzles. The Dark World sections of the game are just too frustrating, and so are all the other puzzles, especially the ones that make you run back for items. Which brings me to number 2. To fully enjoy this game, you need 1 GameCube, 1 copy of the game, 4 Game Boy Advances, and 4 Game Boy Advance to GameCube link cables. When this game launched, that would have cost $930, and that's insane! And unlike its predecessor, Four Swords, Adventures doesn't scale down the puzzles to work with under 4 players. If you're playing with less than 4 people, one of them has to micromanage the extra links. And with fewer people, you're limited in the amount of items you can carry, which means that if you bring the wrong item, that means a minute of backtracking. Four Swords Adventures can be a ton of fun to play, but it's also a game that's hard to get far in without getting really mad at it. Link's Awakening continues to blow me away. It's just not possible that the Game Boy, a handheld known for Tetris and crappy Mario spin-offs, could produce such a thematic game. I mean, it was 144p and I still cared more about Marin than I have about any other Zelda character. The music was 4-bit, but it produced one of the best ever Zelda themes. The writing for this game is just incredible. You know, it's kind of funny how Nintendo always hires the best writers for its weakest consoles, isn't it? If the amount of work and love that must have gone into Link's Awakening was put into a home console release, that game very well might have been at the top of this list. But it wasn't. It was put into the Game Boy. And Link's Awakening is definitely held back by its hardware. But at the time when it was released, when gamers weren't spoiled by HD graphics and super fast processing, I can't imagine how magical it was to play. Okay, I know what you're thinking.
How dare you put Ocarina of Time and Number 8 on the initiative of Ratchet's the greatest game ever created, and anybody who thinks otherwise is the Antichrist.
Look, Ocarina of Time was, at the time of its release, very impressive, and I'm glad that it created the base for the awesomeness of the 3D Zeldas, but I just find it kind of boring. The dungeons are all pretty with the exception of the Spirit Temple, and some of them, are just flat out awful. The overworld is super generic. You have a forest, a desert, a lake, a mountain, and a huge empty plain connecting all of them. It's so predictable. You get to explore a little, but there just isn't much to see. With the exception of the Gerudo sneaking portion of the game and any side quests you might end up doing, everything between dungeons just feels like filler. I mean, so many incredible Zelda titles have been released that one as generic and simple as Ocarina of Time fails to stand out. Now, if you excuse me, I'm changing my name and running to Cuba before my house gets burned down. Minish Cap wasn't the first time Nintendo got lazy and decided to let Capcom do all the work. The Oracle games, like Minish Cap, feel distinct from all the other Zelda games, but for some reason with the Oracle series, they just got it so right! The characters in the Oracle series are so interesting and likable. The dungeons are the most creative and puzzling of all the 2D Zeldas. In what other Zelda game do you stockpile 4 keys just to burn through 2 of them in the same room? I love the difficulty in this game. It's just hard enough that I have trouble breezing through all the dungeons, but it's not so hard that I get stuck. And you gotta love all the throwbacks to the original Zelda that show that Capcom really did love the source material. Oracle of Seasons and Ages are 2 finely crafted games that, like Link's Awakening, really push the Game Boy Color to its limits. A Link to the Past is about as flawless as a game can get. Solid controls, big world with a variety of landscapes, tons of fun, creative dungeons, you can even turn into a bunny. By the end of LTTP, you've been through so much that you feel like you've grown stronger and are now finally worthy of taking on Ganon, not just because you rescued 7 maidens and the game is telling you to. And it's rare for a game to be able to do that. So why isn't A Link to the Past number 1? It's just a bit too predictable. I mean, from the moment you enter the Dark World, you know that you're going through 7 dungeons and then fighting a big boss at the end of all that. I like it when a game keeps me on edge, when my disbelief is completely suspended and I'm swept into the adventure with no idea what lies beyond the next turn. And these next 5 games do that incredibly. Okay, the next 5 games, except for Four Swords. See, with Four Swords, Capcom decided to take all the adventure, all the puzzles, all the plot, and throw that right out the window. And I have to say, it was a damn good decision. Four Swords is one of the best co-op games I've ever played. That is if it really qualifies as co-op. You see, Four Swords brilliantly forces you to cooperate with your friends, but at the same time gives you the option to throw them off a cliff for no reason. I don't know what to say. I've just had so much fun playing Four Swords that even though I can't really put my finger on what makes it such a great game, I just can't put it any lower on this list. I have to say one thing. If you play this game single player, 1, go outside and make some friends, and 2, you're really missing out, because this game really shines in multiplayer. You see, Four Swords is like A Link to the Past, minus the plot, plus more action, times 4, which equals... People said that the Wii was a gimmick. They said that motion controls would never replace the accuracy and the comfort of buttons. But then, Skyward Sword came along and proved... Well, they were mostly right. I actually really liked the motion controls at first. I liked how by the third temple, the enemies had these electric swords that seriously punished you for being imprecise. But then they just threw that all away in the second half of the game. I mean, you could just one-shot everything with the Blessed Bow. You could take hits with no risk with the Hylian Shield. And the Master Sword could just slash right past enemies' swords. Also, I was severely disappointed that the regions you travel to aren't interconnected. I mean, does this look like an immersive world to you? So, what does Skyward Sword do right? Well, it's really fun for one thing, and it brings more to Zelda than any game did since Ocarina of Time. Skyward Sword brings back the best features from older Zeldas, like Majora's Mask-esque side quests for gratitude crystals, and a vast sky of islands waiting to be explored like in Wind Waker. It also adds its own new original gameplay elements, like the Silent Realm. Oh, and of course, there's the obvious reason to play Skyward Sword.
No!
Skyward Sword isn't perfect, but it does a lot right and is absolutely worth buying, even if you have to get off your ass and swing around your Wiimote. Twilight Princess is the first Zelda game I played, and for that reason you might expect me to have a nostalgic obsession with it. I actually was really annoyed with the game in my initial playthrough. The sewers, the Tears of Light, and a few of the early dungeons are just bad, and it was off-putting. But once you get past the initial trio of dungeons and the entire world opens up, Twilight Princess is incredible. No other Zelda game matches the sheer scope of Twilight Princess. There's just so much to see, there's so much to do. Every area of the game is filled with side quests, interesting characters, secrets, and personality. The Fernwords are this surreal forest with enormous trees that you can climb around on. The Gerudo Desert is vast and empty, devoid of all life. Snow Peak is a freezing, barren wasteland where the only way through is to trust your primal instincts. I love the almost post-apocalyptic theme to this game. I mean, other than Castletown, everywhere is pretty run down. Link comes from a village of ranchers, Kakariko is a Wild West town, and other than that, there's just a few outposts of humans. It makes saving the world feel all the more dire. Once you get past the initial boring introductory levels, Twilight Princess has the best dungeons of any Zelda game ever. And the bosses... oh my god, the bosses are so good! Nintendo, please, please, please make Wii U Zelda like Twilight Princess. If you release a game with the same vision as Twilight Princess on powerful hardware with all the kinks ironed out, it will be the best game ever created. After releasing Ocarina of Time, Nintendo sat down and thought, okay, we just released everybody's favorite game of all time, now what? So they decided to go in an entirely different direction with Zelda, and create a game that tried to tell a story. A story about the Cataclysm. A story about how different people living different lives all decide how to live out their final hours, knowing that no matter what they do, they're going to die. Some try to run, some try to carry out their last wish before it all ends, but every single one of them is doomed. Over and over again. Yeah, what's this game rated? EE for everyone? Yeah, okie dokie, why not? I normally play games only for the gameplay, but holy crap, Majora's Mask is one of the most engrossing games ever. Meeting so many characters, seeing their lives intertwine, and then having it all come to an end. This game is so hard to put down. Majora's Mask is an incredible experience, and it helps that you get to experience it through real gameplay, and not these new QuickTime events that the kids keep talking about. And you can play Majora's Mask over and over again and have a different experience each time with all the different side quests it has and all the different ways that the world can be set up before it all comes crashing apart. Majora's Mask is just incredible, and it is absolutely worthy of being almost the greatest Zelda title ever released. least. Wind Waker doesn't have the best dungeons, it doesn't have the best writing, it doesn't have the best items, but it has one thing that none of the other Zelda games, or for that matter, no other games period, can match. Adventure. I can't describe how excited I was when I realized there were 64 quadrants out there, in the vast ocean just waiting to be discovered. As soon as I finished the Forest Haven and freed up my boat, I went out and mapped every one of them. I ran into reefs occupied by Ganon's forces, seemingly useless islands with hidden grottos full of treasure, mini-games, giant octoroks, and even dungeons. I had more fun exploring the Great Sea than I have had exploring the world of any other game ever. I thought the infamous dreaded Triforce quest was fantastic. You got to revisit islands you thought you understood, discover new ways to interact with the same areas, and use new items to uncover new secrets. Wind Waker brings out the adventurer in all of us. It makes you feel like Magellan on the high seas sailing towards who knows what. And on top of all that, Wind Waker has the best controls of any 3D Zelda, and its art style is beautiful. My only complaint is that it doesn't last forever. To me, Wind Waker is not just the greatest Zelda game, but the greatest game of all time.